They can't stop thinking about you. God's favor is making you unforgettable. My dear friend, I want you to stop everything you are doing right now and receive what I'm about to pour into your spirit, because I believe with every fiber of my being that you did not find these words by accident. You did not arrive at this moment through some random and meaningless sequence of events that had nothing to do with the hand of the living God. No, the God who stretched out the heavens and who calls every star by its name, the God who formed you in your mother's womb with deliberate and loving intention, the God who has been present through every single moment of your journey, from the very first breath you ever drew to this exact moment right now, that God arranged this encounter. He saw where you were. He knew what you have been carrying. He understood the specific weight of the specific pain and the specific confusion and the specific longing that brought you to this moment. And He directed your steps here because He has something He needs to speak into the deepest and most private places of your life. And what He wants to speak is something that I believe you have been waiting to hear for a very long time. Something that speaks directly to the experiences of rejection and isolation and being overlooked and being misunderstood and being treated as though your worth was less than what God declared it to be. Something that reframes everything you have been through in a light that will change not just how you see the past, but how you step into the future that God has been preparing for you through every painful chapter of the story you have been living. Here is what God wants you to know today. The people who treated you as though you were forgettable have not forgotten you. The people who walked away as though your absence would cost them nothing are haunted by the cost of it. The people who dismissed your worth, who minimized your gifts, who underestimated the depth of what you carry and the significance of where God was taking you, those very people cannot stop thinking about you. Not because you chased them, not because you campaigned for their attention or their approval or their recognition, but because the God who was with you through every moment of the rejection and the isolation and the being overlooked is the same God who makes the people who dismiss His chosen ones unable to shake the memory of what they dismissed. They think about you constantly because God made you unforgettable, not through your own striving, not through the impressive achievements that would have forced them to notice you, through the unmistakable, indelible, God-breathed mark of divine favor that rests upon your life and that leaves an impression on every heart it encounters that cannot be erased, regardless of how hard the owner of that heart tries to erase it. You are not ordinary. You were never ordinary. And the people who treated you as though you were are now discovering, in the quiet moments when the noise of the world fades and there is nothing left to distract them from the truth, that they have never been able to stop thinking about you. Because God does not let people forget the ones He has chosen. He does not allow His marked ones to fade from the memory of the people whose lives they touched, however briefly or however painfully the touching happened. Receive this word today. Let it reach every part of your heart that has been carrying the weight of feeling forgotten and overlooked and dismissed. Let it speak into the places where the rejection left its mark and where the isolation of the seasons you have been through has sometimes made you wonder whether your life was making any impression at all on the world around you. And let the truth of what God is declaring over you today begin the process of transforming how you see yourself and how you carry the story of everything you have been through. You are unforgettable because God made you so, and no one who has ever encountered the light that rests on your life has been able to walk away and truly forget it. Let me begin by speaking to the specific experience that I know many of you are carrying as you receive these words, because before we can fully receive the liberating truth of what God is declaring over your life today, we need to be honest about the specific pain that the truth is designed to address. Some of you have been through seasons of profound rejection, not the casual passing, did not get the job kind of rejection that everyone experiences and quickly recovers from. The deep, personal, targeted kind of rejection that comes from people whose opinion of you genuinely mattered. From family members who should have been your greatest advocates and who were instead your most consistent critics. From friends who you loved completely and who walked away as though the love you gave them was not worth staying for. From communities that you poured yourself into and that treated your pouring as though it was ordinary and expected rather than as the genuine gift that it was. From people who saw you at your most vulnerable and chose to use that vulnerability against you rather than to honor the trust that the vulnerability represented. That kind of rejection leaves marks, not just in the moment but in the long after, in the way you approach new relationships with a caution that was not there before, in the way you hold back a little of yourself in every new connection, because giving everything and having everything thrown back at you is a lesson that the heart learns quickly and is slow to unlearn. In the way the voice of the people who rejected you sometimes becomes louder than the voice of God in the quiet moments when you are most honest with yourself about what you believe about your own worth. Some of you have been through seasons of profound isolation, seasons when the people who should have been around you were absent, when the community that should have sustained you during the difficulty was nowhere to be found, when the loneliness was not just the absence of people, but the specific kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who do not truly see you, who interact with the surface version of you without ever engaging with the depth of who you actually are. The loneliness of being among people and still feeling profoundly alone is one of the most quietly devastating experiences a human soul can carry. And many of you have been carrying it through seasons that have stretched much longer than you ever imagined you would have to carry it. Some of you have been through seasons of being consistently underestimated, of having the gifts that God placed within you dismissed as ordinary by the people whose recognition would have meant something to you, of having the calling that God placed on your life treated as though it was naive or unrealistic or beyond what someone in your position could reasonably aspire to, of watching people with less faithfulness and less genuine gifting receive the opportunities and the recognition that your own faithfulness and genuine gifting were being bypassed for, and the accumulated experience of being consistently underestimated by the people whose estimation you were in closest proximity to has done something to your confidence that you are still in the process of recovering from. I see you in each of those places, and more importantly, God sees you there. He has not missed a single moment of any of it. He has not been unaware of the cost. He has not been indifferent to the pain. And the word He is speaking over your life today is not a vague and general encouragement that things will eventually improve. It is a specific declaration that is targeted directly at the specific places where the rejection and the isolation and the underestimation have done their damage. You are seen, you are known, you are chosen, and the people who treated you as though you were none of those things are living with the consequences of that mistake in the form of a thought about you that surfaces in their minds at the most inconvenient and unexpected times, and that they cannot seem to shake, regardless of how much time has passed, or how thoroughly they have convinced themselves that they are over whatever happened between you. They are not over it, because God did not let them get over it, because your life, the life that they dismissed, is the life that God chose to mark with His favor. And when God marks a life with His favor, the people who try to erase that life from their world find that the erasure never quite takes. The mark remains, the impression persists, the memory surfaces, and in the surfacing of it, God is doing something in them that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with His sovereign purposes that extend far beyond the boundaries of what either you or they can currently see. I want to speak now about what the favor of God actually is and what it actually does in the life of the person who carries it. Because the word favor is used so frequently in certain circles that it has sometimes been reduced to a general sense that God is rooting for you, which is true, but which falls far short of the full weight of what divine favor actually means and actually produces in a human life. The favor of God is not a vague and general goodwill towards you. It is the specific, targeted, sovereignly deployed activation of divine preference and divine assistance and divine influence in and through your life for the purpose of fulfilling the specific assignment that God placed you here to fulfill. It is the thing that causes the right people to notice you at the right moment without your having to campaign for their attention. It is the thing that opens doors for you that should by every natural calculation have remained closed. It is the thing that causes your reputation to precede you into rooms you have not yet entered, and that prepares those rooms to receive you in ways that your own efforts alone could not have arranged. Psalm 5:12 describes it with a specific and beautiful image. For you, Lord, bless the righteous. You surround them with your favor as with a shield. A shield, not an occasional spotlight, a shield, something that moves with you wherever you go, something that covers you on every side. Something that does not just protect you from specific identified threats, but that creates a comprehensive environment of divine protection and divine enablement around every dimension of your life. And here is the dimension of divine favor that I want to speak to most specifically today. The dimension that is most directly relevant to the experiences many of you have had of being rejected and dismissed and underestimated. Divine favor makes you impossible to genuinely forget. Not in the shallow sense that you made a memorable impression through force of personality or through impressive performance. In the deeper and more lasting sense that the God who was in you and resting upon you left an impression on every heart you encountered that is so thoroughly embedded in that heart's experience that no amount of time or distance or determined effort to move on fully removes it. When God marks a life with his favor, and that marked life intersects with another person's story, what gets deposited in that person's heart is not just a memory of you. It is a trace of God, a whisper of the divine, an imprint of something that is beyond what can be fully explained by the natural characteristics of a natural person. And because it is a trace of God, it does not fade the way purely human impressions fade. It persists. It surfaces unexpectedly. It rises up in quiet moments and in the middle of ordinary days with a specificity and a weight that the person experiencing it cannot quite account for. That is what is happening when the people who dismissed you cannot stop thinking about you. They are not primarily thinking about you. They are experiencing the ongoing resonance of the God who was present in your life and in your interactions with them. They are feeling the persistent vibration of the divine that you carried into their story. And that vibration will not quiet itself until it has accomplished in their hearts what God intended it to accomplish when he allowed your paths to cross. You are a messenger. Your life is a message. And the people who received that message, even when they were not consciously aware of receiving it, even when they were actively resisting what you represented, have been changed by the encounter in ways that continue to produce their effects long after the encounter itself has passed. I want to speak now about the season that most of you were in when the rejection and the dismissal and the underestimation happened, because it is important to understand that the season of being overlooked and being treated as less than what God declared, that season was not a season of God's absence. It was a season of God's preparation. And the distinction between those two interpretations of the same experience makes all the difference in the world in terms of what the experience does to you and what it produces in you and what it enables in the next chapter of your story. When God is preparing someone for a significant assignment, he often allows them to go through a season that looks from the outside and sometimes from the inside, like abandonment, like being forgotten, like being positioned at the margins rather than at the center, like being placed in circumstances that appear to be working against rather than toward the destiny that God declared. Joseph in the pit, Moses in the wilderness for 40 years, David hiding in caves from the very king he was anointed to succeed, Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days immediately after the most affirming spiritual experience of his earthly ministry, his baptism. In every case, the season of apparent marginalization and apparent setback was the season of the most essential and the most irreplaceable preparation, the season when the things that needed to be built into the person could only be built through the specific pressures and the specific limitations and the specific experiences of being in that particular place, the depth of trust that could only be forged in the isolation, the clarity of calling that could only emerge from the season of apparent purposelessness, the freedom from the need for human approval that could only be developed by going through the season where human approval was conspicuously absent. And here is what I want you to receive with everything you have about your own season of being overlooked and dismissed and underestimated. It was not evidence that God had forgotten you. It was evidence that he was so deeply and so specifically invested in what he was building in you that he was willing to allow the discomfort of the season in order to accomplish the formation that the season uniquely enabled. He allowed the rejection because the rejection was developing in you a rootedness in His approval that would have been impossible to develop if the approval of the people around you had been readily available. He allowed the isolation because the isolation was deepening your connection to Him in ways that the constant presence of people would have prevented. He allowed the underestimation because the underestimation was burning away the parts of your motivation that were still dependent on human recognition and leaving only the pure gold of a purpose that was anchored in His declaration rather than in the validation of the people around you. The season of being overlooked was the season of your formation. And the person who emerged from that season, the person you are now having been through everything you have been through, is the person who is equipped to carry what is coming, who has the depth and the rootedness and the freedom from human approval that the next chapter of God's plan for your life requires, who would not have been ready for what is coming if the preparation that the overlooked season provided had not been completed. Your pain had purpose, your rejection was redirection, your isolation was incubation, and the God who is present through every moment of it is the same God who is now about to make visible in your life what He was doing through it. Now I want to speak about what it means that they cannot stop thinking about you, because this truth is not meant to produce in you a sense of superiority over the people who are still wrestling with the impression your life left on them. It is not meant to be received as vindication or as a kind of spiritual satisfaction at the expense of the people who hurt you. It is meant to be received as the revelation of what God was doing through your life, even in the seasons when what He was doing was invisible to you. When someone cannot stop thinking about you despite their best efforts to move on, it is because God planted something in them through you that is still growing, still producing its effect, still doing the work that He intended the encounter to do in their heart and in their life. And that ongoing work, the continued growth of the seed that God planted in them through your presence in their story, is not about you. It is about the sovereign purposes of a God who uses the lives of His marked ones to speak into the lives of the people around them in ways that extend far beyond what the visible surface of any given interaction would suggest. Some of them think about you because they are experiencing conviction, because your life was a living embodiment of choices and values, and a way of being in the world that exposed, without a single word of accusation, the distance between who they were being and who they knew they were created to be. Your peace convicted their chaos. Your forgiveness convicted their bitterness. Your faithfulness convicted their compromise. Your joy in the middle of difficulty convicted their despair in the middle of abundance. And that conviction is not a comfortable experience. It has a way of surfacing at the most inconvenient moments, of interrupting the stories they were telling themselves about why they were right and you were wrong, of making the comfortable narratives they constructed around the way they treated you harder to maintain without the interference of a quiet but persistent inner voice saying, "This is not the truth." Now I want to speak about what it means that they cannot stop thinking about you, because this truth is not meant to produce in you a sense of superiority over the people who are still wrestling with the impression your life left on them. It is not meant to be received as vindication or as a kind of spiritual satisfaction at the expense of the people who hurt you. It is meant to be received as the revelation of what God was doing through your life, even in the seasons when what He was doing was invisible to you. When someone cannot stop thinking about you despite their best efforts to move on, it is because God planted something in them through you that is still growing, still producing its effect, still doing the work that He intended the encounter to do in their heart and in their life. And that ongoing work, the continued growth of the seed that God planted in them through your presence in their story, is not about you. It is about the sovereign purposes of a God who uses the lives of His marked ones to speak into the lives of the people around them in ways that extend far beyond what the visible surface of any given interaction would suggest. Some of them think about you because they are experiencing conviction, because your life was a living embodiment of choices and values, and a way of being in the world that exposed, without a single word of accusation, the distance between who they were being and who they knew they were created to be. Your peace convicted their chaos. Your forgiveness convicted their bitterness. Your faithfulness convicted their compromise. Your joy in the middle of difficulty convicted their despair in the middle of abundance. And that conviction is not a comfortable experience. It has a way of surfacing at the most inconvenient moments, of interrupting the stories they were telling themselves about why they were right and you were wrong, of making the comfortable narratives they constructed around the way they treated you harder to maintain without the interference of a quiet but persistent inner voice saying this is not the truth. Some of them think about you because they are experiencing the specific and particular grief of recognizing the value of something after it is no longer available to them. The blessing that was present in your relationship with them, whether it was your prayers or your encouragement or your wisdom or simply the specific quality of peace that accompanied your presence, is not something that can be readily replaced by other relationships. Because you are not ordinary, and though they may not have recognized the extraordinary nature of what they had while they had it, the absence of it in their life since you left has been quietly and persistently educating them about the rarity of what they let go. Some of them think about you because God is using the memory of you as the instrument through which He is drawing them back towards something they walked away from, not necessarily back toward you as a person, but back toward the God whose presence was most tangibly real to them in the context of their relationship with you. Your life was the closest thing to a living demonstration of who God is that many of them had ever encountered. And the memory of that demonstration, however they may have received it at the time, is serving as the homing signal that God is using to call them back to the reality they moved away from. Your life is ministry, even in your absence, even in the seasons when you have not been actively engaged in any visible form of service or outreach or ministry. The impression your life made on the people who passed through your story is still speaking, still producing its effect, still doing the work that God intended it to do. And you may never know on this side of eternity the full extent of what God accomplished through the simple fact of your being who you are and living how you lived in full view of the people He placed in your path. I want to speak now about the specific qualities that made you impossible to forget, because the unforgettability that God has placed on your life is not a vague and general quality. It is the specific and identifiable expression of specific qualities that the Holy Spirit was developing in you through the very seasons of difficulty and rejection that felt like they were diminishing rather than developing you. The first quality that made you unforgettable was your peace, not a performed peace that was put on display for the benefit of observers, but a genuine, deep, inexplicable peace that was present in your spirit, even in the middle of circumstances that should, by every natural assessment, have produced the opposite. The peace that kept you standing when they expected you to fall. The peace that kept you smiling when they expected you to break. The peace that kept you moving forward when they expected the difficulty to stop you in your tracks. That peace is not natural. No one who has spent any significant time around you has been unable to feel it. And its supernatural character, the fact that it had no natural explanation in the circumstances that surrounded it, made it one of the most compelling and most unforgettable things about you. Because peace in the middle of genuine difficulty is rare. The world has an abundance of people who perform peace while feeling chaos. But a person whose peace is genuine, whose stillness in the storm is real and rooted and not manufactured, that person is extraordinary. And extraordinary things are not forgotten. The second quality that made you unforgettable was your capacity for genuine forgiveness. Not the grudging, surface level, never quite complete forgiveness that most people manage to extend to the people who have hurt them. The genuine, complete, love-producing, prayer over them forgiveness that can only come from someone who has genuinely received and genuinely internalized the forgiveness that God extended to them in their own season of needing it most. When you chose forgiveness over revenge, when you chose prayer over retaliation, when you released the people who hurt you from the debt they owed you and continued to treat them with the grace that their behavior did not deserve, you did something that most people who witnessed it had never seen before. You demonstrated a power that was clearly not of human origin, and that demonstration planted something in the hearts of every person who witnessed it that they have not been able to uproot, regardless of how far they moved from the moment in which it happened. The third quality that made you unforgettable was your consistency. The way you remained fundamentally yourself through every season. The way the pressure of the difficult times did not change your character in the ways that pressure changes most people. The way the rejection and the isolation and the underestimation did not make you hard or bitter or closed or vengeful in the ways that those experiences make most people hard and bitter and closed and vengeful. You remained soft. You remained open. You remained genuinely loving in an environment that was giving you every reason to stop loving. And that consistency of character, that rootedness of identity that the storms could not shake, was and is one of the most extraordinary things any person who has ever known you has has ever witnessed. I want to address now something that is important for your own well-being and your own spiritual health as you receive the truth that the people who dismissed you cannot stop thinking about you. And that something is the question of what you do with that knowledge, because the truth I am sharing with you today can be received in two very different ways that lead to two very different places. It can be received as vindication, as the spiritual equivalent of getting the last word, as a kind of satisfaction at the expense of the people who are now wrestling with the impression your life made on them. And if it is received that way, it will produce in you exactly the kind of pride and the kind of superiority and the kind of subtle contempt for the people who are still figuring out what they dismiss that will undermine everything that the difficult seasons were developing in you. It will take the gold that the fire of the hard seasons refined in you and begin to tarnish it with the very qualities that God was working so hard to burn away. Or it can be received as the revelation that it is truly intended to be, as the evidence of a God who wastes nothing, who takes every painful chapter and uses it for purposes that extend far beyond your own personal healing and growth, who allows your life to be the message that He speaks into the hearts of the people around you, including and especially the people who are most difficult and who cost you the most, who uses your unforgettability not to satisfy your desire for vindication, but to advance His own sovereign purposes in the lives of the people who are still carrying the impression your life made on them. Receive it as revelation, not as vindication, and let the truth that your life is speaking into the lives of the people who dismissed you produce in you not pride, but compassion. Not satisfaction at their discomfort, but the genuine, prayer-filled, God-hearted desire to see every person who is experiencing the conviction and the longing and the unanswerable spiritual questions that the memory of you is producing in them find their way back to the God whose presence they are actually experiencing through the memory. Because the people who cannot stop thinking about you do not ultimately need you. They need the God they are sensing through you. And the most powerful thing you can do with the knowledge that your life is still speaking into theirs is to pray for them, to hold them before the throne of the God who placed you in their path and who is using the memory of you as the instrument of His ongoing work in their hearts, to ask that everything He intended the encounter to accomplish in them would be fully accomplished, and to trust Him to do exactly that in ways that are beyond what your limited perspective can plan or predict or produce. Let me speak now about the next chapter of your story, because the truth that your life is unforgettable and that God has been using the impression your life makes on others as an instrument of His ongoing sovereign work is a truth that points forward as much as it speaks to the past. And what it points forward to is a chapter in your life that is going to make everything that came before it make sense in a way that it has not yet made sense. The isolation that looked like being forgotten was the hidden preparation for a visibility that God is about to release. The rejection that felt like being pushed to the margins was the sovereign positioning for a centrality that God has been arranging in the seasons when you could not see the arrangement. The underestimation that produced so much pain was the condition under which God was building in you everything that the next level of what He has declared over your life is going to require. And the people who thought they were consigning you to irrelevance by the way they treated you are about to witness with their own eyes what God does with the ones He prepared in the hidden seasons. They are about to see the breakthrough that the preparation was always moving toward. The breakthrough that is going to be so undeniably, so unmistakably the work of God that no one who witnesses it is going to be able to attribute it to luck or coincidence or the natural consequences of human effort. Because that is how God works. He prepares in the hidden place. He refines in the fire. He develops in the isolation, and then He reveals in the most public and the most undeniable way possible at the moment of His perfect choosing, the fullness of what He has been building through every season that looked like regression but was actually progression of the most significant kind. Joseph's brothers watched the brother they had sold as a slave become the second most powerful man in the most powerful empire in the world. And there was nothing they could say, nothing they could do, no narrative they could construct that adequately accounted for what they were witnessing through any lens other than the one that Joseph himself provided. When he said, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." That is the testimony that is forming in your life. The testimony that will require no argument and no defense and no campaign for recognition, because it will be so self-evidently the work of God that every person who witnesses it will know without being told that this was not human achievement. This was divine faithfulness. This was the God who was present through every season of the hidden preparation, finally revealing what He was always building. I want to speak now about the specific things that are coming in the next chapter of your story. Because the declaration that your life is unforgettable and that God has been using the impression of your life to speak into the hearts of the people around you is connected to a specific and approaching season of divine visibility and divine breakthrough that is the natural fruit of everything that the hidden seasons have been producing. The people who once ignored your existence are beginning to notice you, not because you changed your strategy or increased your visibility or did anything differently to attract their attention, because God is doing what He promised to do for the people who remain faithful to Him through the hidden seasons. He is elevating, He is promoting, He is causing the life that the world overlooked to become the life that the world cannot look away from. Not because of who you are in the human sense, but because of who He is in you and what His faithfulness through your story is beginning to make visible to everyone who is positioned to see it. The doors that were closed to you in previous seasons are beginning to open. Not the doors that were merely shut by human preference or human politics or human assessment of your potential. The doors that were sovereignly closed by God because you were not yet ready for what was on the other side of them and because the thing on the other side of them was not yet ready for you. Those doors are beginning to open. And when they open, when the divine timing for the opening arrives, the opening will be so clear and so obviously aligned with everything that the hidden seasons were preparing you for, that you will see in an instant what God was doing through all of it. The provision that seemed so slow in coming is being aligned. The relationships that your calling is going to require are being arranged. The opportunities that your preparation has been making you ready for are being positioned. And the people who tried to prevent your advancement are discovering, to their own confusion and their own unavoidable confrontation with the sovereignty of God, that the prevention they engineered became the very preparation that made your advancement more complete than it would have been if the path had been smooth and unobstructed from the beginning. This is your season. The season of the hidden preparation giving way to the visible breakthrough. The season of the overlooked becoming the undeniable. The season of the marginalized becoming the central. The season when the people who thought they consigned you to forgettability discover that God made you the most unforgettable person in every story you were ever part of. I want to speak now about something that is profoundly practically important for how you step into this next chapter. It is the question of what you do and what you do not do as the visibility and the breakthrough begin to manifest. What you do not do is seek vindication. You do not reach back to the people who dismissed you and make sure they know what they missed. You do not engineer situations designed to make them confront the extent of what they underestimated. You do not allow the elevation that God is releasing into your life to become a platform for the settling of scores that God is asking you to leave entirely in His hands. Because the moment you take the vindication into your own hands, you remove it from His and you begin to operate from a place of pride that will undermine every good thing the elevation was designed to produce. What you do is continue doing exactly what you have been doing in the hidden seasons. You remain faithful. You remain humble. You remain genuinely grateful for every evidence of God's faithfulness without allowing the gratitude to tip into the kind of public performance of blessing that is more about being seen to be blessed than about genuinely honoring the God who blessed you. You remain accessible to the people God places in your path, including and especially the ones who are still in their own hidden seasons and who need the testimony of someone who has been through the fire and come out not just surviving but transformed. And you remain rooted in the relationship with God that was the source of everything the difficult seasons produced in you. Because the elevation that is coming is not the destination. It is not the place where you arrive and relax and stop needing the intimacy with God that sustained you through the preparation. It is the platform from which the next dimension of the purpose God placed you here to fulfill is going to be expressed. And the expression of that purpose requires no less of the depth and the rootedness and the genuine connection with God that the hidden seasons developed. It requires more. Stay rooted, stay humble, stay genuinely grateful, and let God do what only God can do, which is to make the story of your life the testimony that speaks so loudly and so clearly of His faithfulness that everyone who hears it is drawn not to you, but to the God who is with you through everything. Let me speak now about the people who are going to encounter you in this next season. People who are going to enter your story without the context of everything you have been through, who are going to experience the version of you that has been shaped and refined and deepened by the fire of the preparation seasons, who are going to benefit from who you became through what you went through without having to walk through what you walked through themselves. Those people are going to encounter something extraordinary. They are going to meet someone who carries a peace that is not manufactured, and a joy that is not performed, and a wisdom that is not academic, and a love that is not conditional. They are going to meet someone whose spirit carries the weight of of genuine encounter with God, the weight of having been through something and having found God faithful in the middle of it and on the other side of it and in ways that the going through alone could produce. And many of them are going to be changed by the encounter, not because you said or did anything extraordinary by human standards, because the God who is in you is going to be tangible to them, because the fruit of the seasons of formation is going to be visible in the way you engage with them and the way you listen to them and the way you carry their burdens alongside them and the way you pray for them and the way you believe for them when their own faith is thin. Your life is a gift to the people who are going to encounter it in this next season. The difficult seasons did not just prepare you for your own breakthrough. They prepared you to be the kind of presence in other people's lives that only someone who has been through the fire and found God faithful in it can be. And the ministry that flows from that kind of presence, the specific, life-giving, genuinely transformative ministry of someone who has been through something and who carries the fruit of having walked through it with God, that is one of the most powerful forms of ministry available in the kingdom. You are not just a recipient of God's faithfulness. You are a carrier of it, a living demonstration of it. And every person who encounters you is going to be impacted by that demonstration in ways that you may not always see in the moment, but that God is going to use for purposes that reach far beyond what either of you can currently imagine. Father, I want to close this message with a prayer over every person who has received these words today, a prayer that covers them as they step into the next chapter of the story you have been writing through every painful and every beautiful and every confusing chapter of the journey that brought them to this moment. Lord, I pray for the one who came to this message still carrying the weight of rejection that left its mark on their spirit in ways they are still recovering from. Meet them in that place of unhealed hurt and speak into it with a specific and personal tenderness that only you can offer. Let them receive today the truth that what the people who rejected them meant for harm, you are turning into the formation of something extraordinary in them. Let the sting of the rejection be replaced by the revelation of the purpose that you were accomplishing through it. Lord, I pray for the one who has been in the isolation season and who has sometimes wondered whether being forgotten by the people around them meant they were forgotten by you. Speak clearly into that fear today. You have not forgotten them. You have never forgotten them. Not for a single moment of a single day of the isolation have they been outside the reach of your attention and your love and your specific, detailed, personally invested concern for every dimension of their life. They were not forgotten, they were hidden, and the hiding was preparation for the revealing that is approaching. Lord, I pray for the one who has been consistently underestimated, who has watched others receive the recognition and the opportunities that their own faithfulness and their own genuine gifting were being bypassed for. Give them a fresh revelation today of how you see them, of the weight and the significance that you assign to the gifts and the calling and the specific contribution that you placed within them. And let that revelation be the foundation of a confidence that does not depend on human recognition in order to remain intact. Lord, I pray for all of them as they step into the next chapter, the chapter of the hidden preparation, giving way to the visible breakthrough. Go before them into every opportunity and every conversation and every encounter that this new season holds. Open the doors that need to be opened. Close the doors that need to be closed. Align the relationships and the resources and the circumstances that the fullness of their calling requires. And let the testimony that is produced by what you do through this next chapter be so undeniably, so unmistakably the work of your faithful hand that everyone who witnesses it is drawn not to them but to you. Let them carry the elevation with the humility that preserves the fruit of the hidden seasons. Let them receive the visibility with the gratitude that keeps them rooted in the awareness that every good thing in their life comes from your hand. And let them step into every room and every relationship and every opportunity of this new season with the awareness that they carry something extraordinary, not because of who they are, because of who you are in them. You are with them, Lord. You have always been with them. And what you have been building through everything they have been through is something that is going to speak of your faithfulness for the rest of their lives and beyond. Let them know that today. Let it settle into the deepest part of their spirit, and let it be the truth that carries them forward into the fullness of everything you have always declared over their lives. In the name of Jesus. Amen. My dear friend, I want to close with one final word that I want to carry with you beyond this message and into every day of the season ahead. You are unforgettable, not because of what you have achieved or what you have accumulated or what the world has recognized or awarded or applauded in your life, because God made you unforgettable. He placed His mark on your life. He breathed His presence into your spirit. He allowed His light to shine through you in ways that left impressions on every heart you ever encountered that cannot be erased. The people who dismissed you remember you. The people who rejected you think about you. The people who underestimated you are watching what God is doing in your life with the quiet, unavoidable awareness that they missed something that they cannot fully name, but that they cannot stop feeling the absence of. That is not your achievement. That is His faithfulness. That is the God who makes the overlooked undeniable, who makes the marginalized central, who takes the one that the world decided was forgettable and makes that one's life the testimony that the world cannot stop talking about. You are that one. You have always been that one, and the next chapter of your life is going to make that truth more visible to more people than any previous chapter ever has. Walk into it with peace, with humility, with gratitude, with the settled confidence of a person who knows that they did not get here by their own ability and that they are not going to navigate what comes next by their own ability, but by the same grace and the same faithfulness and the same sovereign, all-encompassing, impossibility-transforming favor of the God who has been with you through every single chapter of the story. He is with you still, and what He is about to do through the rest of it is going to be extraordinary. They cannot stop thinking about you because God made you unforgettable, and the best of your story is still ahead.